If you're trying to manage your RLS with magnesium and stretching, I have some bad news. The research doesn't back that up. And there are treatments with actual clinical trials behind them that nobody's talking about, including doctors. I've spent 6 years trying to stop my restless legs. Most of what I tried, well, when I actually looked at the research, it barely works. The things that are backed by science, my doctor never mentioned a single one. There are four tiers of RLS relief when you look at the research. Most people with restless leg syndrome are spending all their time in the worst tier. So here's the problem with RLS advice online, in forums, even from doctors. It's either try stretching and reduce stress, or it's buried in a medical journal behind a paywall written in language nobody can read. Nobody's actually going through the clinical studies and ranking these treatments in plain English. So that's what this video is. I went through the research, randomized controlled trials, systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and I put every major RLS treatment into one of four tiers. Tier 1 is barely supported by science. Tier 4 is where the real evidence lives. By the end, you might be surprised where your current treatment falls. Let's start at the bottom. Tier 1. These are things that feel like they should work. They're everywhere. Doctors mention them casually. People swear by them online. The first is magnesium, probably the most recommended supplement for restless legs syndrome on the internet. And some people do feel better on it. But here's the problem. The clinical trial data is weak. Most studies show any benefit had tiny sample sizes, no control groups, or didn't account for the placebo effect. The largest systematic review on magnesium for RLS found insufficient evidence to recommend it. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't help you personally, but it shouldn't be your whole strategy. Also in tier 1, basic stretching. Stretching might give you temporary relief. There's a mechanical reason for that. Your muscles are less tense. The sensations briefly ease up, but there are no clinical trials showing stretching actually reduces RLS severity long term. It's a bandage, not a treatment. Now, tier 1 isn't useless. It's just not where you want to stop. Tier 2. Now, this is where things get more interesting. Let's look at exercise, not a casual walk. I mean consistent aerobic exercise, 30 minutes at least 3 times a week. There are actual randomized controlled trials on this. One 12-week study showed participants had significantly fewer RLS symptoms compared to controls. The mechanism is probably dopaminergic. Regular exercise increases dopamine activity, which directly affects the system that drives RLS. The catch, it has to be consistent and timing matters. I'll come back to that at the end because there's a version of this advice that your doctor might give you that's actually counterproductive. Also in tier 2, pneumatic compression. This one surprises most people. These are inflatable leg sleeves, the kind you see in hospital recovery rooms. There are real randomized trials showing they reduce RLS symptoms, particularly at night. If you've never heard of this, ask your doctor. Then there's near infrared light therapy. There's emerging evidence for this. There was a placebo-controlled trial published in a peer-reviewed journal showing significant RLS symptom reduction. The science isn't fully settled yet, but the early data is more promising than magnesium is. Tier 3, and this is what I wish someone had told me at the very beginning, and it's iron. Not necessarily the supplements from the drugstore. I'm talking about treating iron deficiency as a root cause. The research on this is strong. Low ferritin, that's your stored iron, is directly linked to RLS severity. The lower your ferritin, the worse your symptoms tend to be. And here's the part that gets me genuinely frustrated. The normal range for ferritin that most labs use goes as low as 12. Doctors look at that range and tell you that you're fine. But the research on RLS specifically shows you want your ferritin above 75, ideally above 100, to see meaningful symptom improvement. RLS patients get their ferritin tested and are told that's normal when they're sitting at 28 or 30. That's not fine if you have RLS. And what about intravenous iron? This shows some of the most impressive RLS trial results I've found. One 12-week trial showed patients getting IV iron had dramatic reductions in symptom severity, results that rivaled dopamine agonists with none of the risks. More on that in a second. If you don't know your ferritin number, that's the first thing to do after you finish this video. Before tier 4, which is where the FDA approved medications live, and where I'm going to tell you something about dopamine agonists that your doctor might not bring up on their own, make sure you're subscribed. Every week I cover RLS truths that don't make it into the 15 minutes you get with your doctor. So tier 4, this is where the clinical gold standard lives. The most evidence, the biggest trials, the FDA approvals. Alpha to delta ligands. That's gabapentin and pregabalin. Specifically, gabapentin and carbol is FDA approved for restless leg syndrome. Multiple large clinical trials back this up. Strong, consistent symptom relief, and critically, they don't cause augmentation. Also, tier 4, dopamine agonists, pramipexole, ropinirole, and rotigotine. These are also FDA approved for RLS. The evidence that they work is strong, relief is often significant and fast. But there is something you must know. It's augmentation. Now, if you're on dopamine agonists and your RLS is getting worse over time, if it's spreading to your arms or starting earlier in the day or lasting longer into the night, that's augmentation. And this is the crazy part. The medication is actually making your condition worse in the long run. Studies suggest augmentation happens in up to 40% of patients on dopamine agonists over 10 years. Some estimates go higher. It's why the latest international RLS guidelines are now recommending alpha 2 delta ligands as the first choice for long-term treatment, specifically because they don't carry that risk and they're effective. If you're currently on a dopamine agonist, that's not a reason to panic, but it is a reason to have a specific conversation with your doctor about long-term strategy. Okay, here's the full picture. Tier 1, weak evidence, magnesium, stretching, not useless, but don't let this be your entire plan. Tier 2, moderate evidence, consistent aerobic exercise, pneumatic compression, near infrared light. Tier 3, there is strong evidence, iron optimization. Know your ferritin, get it above 75. This is the most missed intervention in RLS, and it has some of the strongest data. And then tier 4, the strongest evidence, gabapentin-based medications and dopamine agonists with a clear warning about augmentation if you're on the dopamine side. The pattern I see constantly, and I live this myself, is people spending years in tier 1 while tiers 3 and 4 exist. Not because they're not trying, because nobody walked them through the actual evidence. That's the whole point of this channel. One last thing, I promised I'd come back to this. Some doctors will tell you to walk or do light exercise right before bed to tire your legs out. For some people, vigorous exercise within 2 to 3 hours of sleep actually triggers RLS or makes it worse. Gentle walking is usually fine, but hard exercise late at night, test it carefully. It's individual. Drop your current treatment in the comments. I read everyone and I'm genuinely curious where most people are landing on this tier list. And follow for RLS truths your doctor won't tell you. Lastly, a quick disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I share evidence-based treatments and information, plus my own experience. If you're considering any medication changes, always talk with your doctor first.